Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. The Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics, meeting 118, breach of personal information involving Cambridge Analytica and Facebook. And today we have back Zachary Massingham, Chief Executive Officer of Aggregate IQ. I'll just turn it over to the clerk for a moment, Mr. Massingham.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Massingham. The solemn affirmation is as follows, if you could repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Zack Massingham,
Do solemnly, sincerely, and truly affirm and declare
do solemnly, truly, and sincerely affirm and declare
the taking of any oath
the taking of any oath
is according to my religious belief unlawful.
is according to my religious belief unlawful.
And I do also solemnly, sincerely,
And I do also solemnly, sincerely,
and truly affirm
and truly affirm
and declare that the evidence
and declare that the evidence
I shall give on this examination
I shall give on this examination
shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You sign it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Massingham. You have opening comments. You have 10 minutes.
No, just thank you for inviting me back today.
First question from Mr. Saini for 7 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Massingham. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to go back to a question that I had asked Mr. Sylvester when he appeared here prior to the summer break. I asked him about querying data in the RIP-On program that features an option for a disengagement target. And Chris Vickery had uncovered this evidence that in the RIP-On voter querying data, there is an option for a disengagement target. What do you understand the value of this purpose, or the purpose of this value to be?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that data that's there.
You're not familiar with?
No.
Okay. You were not involved in any of the production of this program or this programming or anything?
I'm not a software developer.
Okay, but you would have understood how it worked, wouldn't you? As a co-owner of the company, you would have understood the product that you were selling. You may not have produced the product, but you would have understood what the value of the product was, wouldn't you?
I believe what you're referring to there is one of SEL's scores. I'm not familiar with all their scores or any of the different things that were there. I think Jeff could probably speak to that better than I could.
So when you produced the product, you never did a run-through of the product? You didn't understand how the product worked? Since you were going to sell the product, I mean, the first thing they teach you in business is you got to understand your product to sell it. Mm-hmm. So I don't understand how you wouldn't know this, especially if it's a value that was purposely put into a program.
Sorry, SEL employed us for contract development on that. They defined what scores information they wanted to present, and our team put that together for them.
Okay, so you don't have any understanding of why they did that, or you didn't find it odd that they had a value for disengagement?
I wasn't aware that they even had a value for disengagement, sir.
Okay. Can you describe in detail the work that you're doing for the Ukrainian political party Osnova?
No, I cannot. I believe they have an app. That's about it.
So your company is doing. So your company, which has been reiterated, there's two principles. You and Mr. Sylvester are doing work in another country, and you don't know what that work is.
No, it's not us. We're simply providing a tool, a software tool.
Who are you providing this tool to?
To WPA.
You're providing this tool to
They're an
WPA.
American company.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're subcontract by WPA to do this work in the Ukraine.
No, we just give the tool to WPA.
So you have no.
No.
So you have no connection with Ukraine or any work done for Ukraine. You're simply working for WPA.
Correct.
Okay. So now, you know that the CEO of WPA, Chris Wilson, was Ted Cruz's former pollster, and he is the principal of WPA, and he's recently appeared on Russian state propaganda to talk about his campaign work. Were you not concerned in any way that your work was being used in another country, or were you unaware of that?
I was unaware of any
Okay,
appearance.
so you're contracted by WPA to provide a product, and you had no inclination to ask where the product was going to go or how it would be used, or was it just do the work and forget about the repercussions?
I'm sorry. We provide it's simply a tool. It can be licensed by.
No. I'm not disagreeing with what you provided. So let's just keep this very simple in business ways. So you're a businessman, I'm a businessman. Let's keep it very simple. You're contracted by somebody to produce a product, right? That product that you're producing is for WPA. WPA is using that product or has business in the Ukraine. You never knew that that was where the product was going to go. That's where it was going to be used, why it was being used, what purpose it was being used for. You had no idea of any of that? Like, I get it's a tool. It's a tool, it's a hammer, it's a screwdriver. I get all that. But you didn't know where it was going to be used?
No, we knew where it was going to be used.
You knew where it was going to be used?
Yeah.
Okay, and it didn't bother you that this company was doing work in the Ukraine for a political party? It didn't occur to you in any way?
No, the tool itself is quite generic. It's a canvassing tool. There's nothing particularly special about it, so that wouldn't bother me.
Okay, let's move on to a different question. Do I have some time? Okay.
Minutes.
It's been recently reported that you have developed a script that makes fake work logs. Can you tell me why you developed a script, for which client, whether you have ever used it in Canada, and whether you've ever used it yourself?
Sorry, I'm not a developer, so I don't know, and I couldn't actually speak to that.
Okay. You don't know that question. Okay, let me ask you another question. Who is Philippe Travers? And do you know who he is?
Yeah, he's an employee.
Okay. So what do you suppose he meant when on June 24th of 2016, when he thanked UKIP for the free money?
I'm sorry, I don't know. That was well before he started with us as an employee.
But on June 24th, 2016, he made a comment where he thanked UKIP, United Kingdom Independence Party, for the free money. Do you know what he meant by that? Was it anything to do with Brexit? What money he might be referring to?
I honestly don't know, sir.
But he was your employee?
Not at that time, no.
When did he start?
He did not start. I think it was almost a year and a half after that.
So, okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
Next up, for 7 minutes, Mr. Kent.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being with us this morning, Mr. Massingham. To cut to the chase, is there any of the testimony, any of the remarks that you made to this committee earlier this year that you would wish to correct before the committee today?
I don't believe so, no.
And that would be with regards to the relationship of aggregate IQ to SCL?
No, I'm perfectly comfortable with my statement, sir.
And with regards to Mr. Wiley's testimony that aggregate IQ was in effect, a shell company to process data that had been acquired by other means?
No, we don't process data or modelers do anything like that.
Now, an awful lot has happened since you testified before us. In July, the Information Commissioner's Office in the United Kingdom issued an enforcement notice ordering the company to stop handling data belonging to British citizens. And at the same time, although unnoticed until the last couple of weeks, the Information Commissioner's Office accuses Aggregate IQ and issued the first violation notice under the European Union's General Data Protection Regulations, accusing Aggregate IQ of violating Articles 5, 6, and 14 of the GDPR because it processed personal data in a way that the data subjects were not aware of for purposes, as they say, they would not have expected and without a lawful basis for that processing. I understand Aggregate IQ is appealing that notice of violation. What can you tell us about that?
So we have appealed that that issue, and we've had a very good dialogue with the ICO. They have recognized that the notice was far too broad. And to quote, on further consideration, the Commissioner accepts that the terms of the notice were overly broad. And accordingly, she has invited the tribunal to substitute a notice with Annex 1, basically saying that once we have completed the OIPC and OPC investigations, that we will simply delete the 1,000 or so email addresses that we had.
Now, in your earlier testimony with Mr. Sylvester, you were asked whether or not you sought legal counsel with the knowledge that you may have violated the new GDPR rules or the previous UK data protection rules. You denied that you'd sought legal counsel at that time. Do you still hold that position?
I'm sorry, I don't actually recall that.
Well, it is in the testimony, but I think the concern of the British Information Commissioner is that in disregard of the rules, and because you still possess the data at the time after the GDPR came into effect, that in effect you were violating the section which says that data collected from European residents, from British residents, without consent for the manipulation, the processing, the handling that might later occur, that are transferred to foreign locations and then reintroduced to electoral processes are in fact violations of the new law. Were you aware of that?
So we have an ongoing dialogue with the ICO. That data was never used. It was simply backed up and there in that repository by mistake. Once we have concluded everything with the OIPC and OPC, then that will be removed.
And you still deny that you knowingly or unknowingly worked with data that had been improperly harvested from Facebook?
Sir, can you repeat that question?
Can you tell us whether there was a denial again, there were various denials in your earlier testimony with Mr. Sylvester about Aggregate IQ ever handling improperly harvested Facebook personal data?
Aggregate IQ has never received any raw Facebook data.
We're not saying raw. We're talking. It may have been boiled down, but did are you using? We're coming back to. I'm sorry.
I couldn't tell you where the sources of all the data came from SEO.
Did that not concern you at the time that you were dealing with data that that was as personal as we all know it is? That certainly other jurisdictions have.
What we saw of that information wasn't overly personal now.
And
sorry?
in other words, you still deny that there was any knowledge about the source of the data that you were working with, whether it was raw data or otherwise?
Yes.
How much time do I have?
About a minute.
Okay. Mr. Massingham, can you tell us about the contract that you entered into with a UK company called Hanbury and Mr. Amit Gill to represent AIQ's interests in the United Kingdom in 2017?
I think that was just for a small consulting project. I'm not sure anything really came of it.
And has it expired?
I believe so, yes. But
All right,
we didn't do much work.
I'll relinquish time till next time.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. Next up for 7 minutes, Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Mr. Massingham, for joining us. We were sorry you didn't join us last time. I hope you're feeling better.
Thanks for having me back.
Thank you. One of the questions we were trying to figure out with the Believe campaign was you were paid basically about $1 million Canadian for about 6 days' work, and there was very little data gathered in that time. And Mr. Sylvester explained that your role with the project wasn't to collect data, it was to place ads. So was that the role that you had with Believe?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Any pledges they might have received were a happy extra for them.
Okay. And so in those 6 days, June 16th to June 23rd, 2016, you were placing ads for the Believe campaign, and that's where the money went?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Because the UK Commissioner's Office reports that, quote, Believe did not run any ads. I'll bet their electoral returns indicates they were committed. They committed expenditure to this. And the Privacy Commissioner also found that the Believe campaign didn't run any ads. So what were you doing if you weren't running ads?
I'm sorry. We were showing ads on Facebook in Believe ads accounts. I'm confused by the statement there. That
did you read the findings of the UK Information Commissioners and the Electoral Commissioners report on your work?
Jeff has been handling that particular matter.
But you're the CEO and you didn't read it? Because it says you didn't place any ads. So I'm confused. You got paid $1 million. If you didn't place ads, where'd the money go?
So I'm telling you here today that we did place ads and that those ads were placed in Believe ad accounts and their budget was spent on their ads.
Okay. So you say that the Information Commissioner's report and the Electoral Commissioner's report is wrong.
Perhaps it's simply misinterpreted. But
misinterpreted? No. You remember you're under oath. I mean, because this is a big issue. If two independent reports said you didn't place any ads and you tell our committee you did place ads, it's kind of hard to believe you over two independent commissions that were not working together that said Believe did not place any ads. So what did you do with the $1 million Canadian that you were paid for 6 days' work?
As I've told you, we placed those ads for Believe and Believe ad accounts.
Okay, because in the drive there were ad mock-ups. So you set up ad mock-ups, but they said that there was no ads actually run. So when in the Slack logs where you tell Mr. Grimes, who's the 22-year-old student who suddenly has $1 million Canadian to spend, that he's on track to spend $300K, what were you spending that $300K on?
On his Facebook ads.
Okay. And you said, do you need me to grab some money for you? So what was your role in moving this money?
I believe the chat log you're referring to, Darren had or was asking if it would be possible that he redirect some of the money that had gone to us to him for other campaign purposes. That never actually happened. So,
okay, so where did that $300K that you were going to grab for him, where were you going to grab that money from?
That was money that had already been sent to us. directed to us.
From who?
For Believe. From Vote Leave.
From Vote Leave. Okay, yeah, because he says, no, that's fine. Victoria is sorting this out, Victoria Woodcock. Because what the Electoral Commission and the Privacy Commission in the UK found was that there was a breach of British electoral law based on a plan to circumvent the finance limits between Believe and Vote Leave. And between those two is your organization, which is the conduit for that money. So do you accept the findings that your work was involved in breaking British electoral law and undermining the legitimacy of the Brexit vote?
So we never saw any evidence of coordination while we were there conducting work for either organization. And in Facebook's own report, they have shown that Believe placed those ads. So I'm very confused as to how things are being interpreted now.
Yeah. Well, I'm very confused, too. You say you saw no, and Mr. Sylvester says it's almost to a T, what you just said. We saw no evidence of any coordination between the two. You guys come out of nowhere, and you get $1 million from Believe. You get $5 million Canadian from Vote Leave. You're the conduit that's been found in a campaign that's been found guilty of breaching electoral laws. You're asking, should I get money for you? And you say you see no coordination at all? Like, how do you get into this business if you don't do due diligence? I mean, otherwise you're getting played a total sap here. How can you tell us that you didn't see that coordination?
We do our due diligence, and we saw no evidence of coordination between those campaigns.
Okay, so there's one of the documents we have is the picture that was leaked by Sani, and it's you at the Vote Leave headquarters with Steve Parkinson of Vote Leave, and there's the Thames and Westminster in the background. That's also where the campaign for Believe was, right?
I'm not sure where the campaign for Believe was.
You don't know where the campaign for Believe was?
I'm not sure they had an office. They were a small organization.
Weren't they in the same building?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay. But, so let's just go back this again. So Christopher Wiley said that you were set up as, quote, a proxy money laundering vehicle between these two campaigns. You say you don't know where their organization, if it's even had headquarters. You are coordinating money between the two, and they've been found guilty of setting up a plan to circumvent the electoral laws, and they said you spent no money on ads, and you're telling us you did. So credibly, if you're going to do international work, how did you get set up to play the patsy unless you were involved?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
You don't understand the question is, how is it possible that you've been found guilty, or this campaign was found guilty of breaching electoral finance laws? Chris Wiley said that you were set up as the money laundering vehicle. You were coordinating between two campaigns. There's money flowing back and forth. You say that you spent that money on ads. Two independent reports find that you did not spend any ads. If you're the honest guy in all of this, how did you get these contracts? How do you get to do all this international work if you're so easy to play the patsy here?
I'll say it again. We saw no evidence of any coordination between those campaigns. We placed those ads
But
separately.
the two commission reports found evidence of collusion, and it goes back to you. So how did you not see that?
I'm sorry. We have not been listed in those documents. To the best of my knowledge, we're not listed in those documents, so I cannot comment.
Thank you, Mr. Angus.
Thank you.
Next up for 7 minutes, Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Thanks very much. So Dominic Cummings said of AIQ, we couldn't have done it without them. So my first question is, do you believe that AIQ's work was instrumental in the success of the Brexit campaign? Or is Mr. Cummings wrong?
No, I think we all played our part there. They had an amazing team.
Okay, so you had just, to follow up on Mr. Angus's questions, you had just indicated you're not in the documents, but I just want to make sure I know what document I'm talking about. So in the summer, in July, I've got an electoral commission report that lists you repeatedly discussing a common plan as between Believe and Vote Leave. Is this the document that you don't think you're listed in?
I don't have these documents in front of me. I'm not sure.
So you've never read the findings of the Electoral Commission?
No, not in their completion.
So wait, okay. You're this. Remind me what the position is that you hold at AIQ. I'm confused.
I'm the CEO. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So you're the CEO of the company, and the company has been found to be part of a common plan with respect to violations of election finance law in the UK, and you haven't read the report. The report's under 50 pages. Are you aware that the report's under 50 pages?
As I believe we've told the committee, I have been off work for some time. Jeff has been handling most of these proceedings, if not all of these proceedings.
So you haven't read the report, and you're simply unaware that AIQ was referenced in this document multiple times. Is that's the truth? Take your time.
Ask Jeff.
While we might be mentioned, they have
So you are aware you're mentioned.
If
Baby steps.
I haven't read the document, so I cannot be sure. If it was in front of me, I could certainly review it.
Okay, so let's go with this then. This is from the Electoral Commission report because you haven't read it. Let me read some of it to you. On June 11, 2016, Mr. Cummings wrote to Mr. Clark saying that Vote Leave had all the money it could spend and suggested the following. However, there is another organization that could spend your money. Would you be willing to send the 100K to some social media ninjas? You're the social media ninjas. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Excellent. While Believe may have contributed its own design, style, and input, the services provided by Aggregate IQ to Believe use Vote Leave messaging at the behest of Believe's campaign director. It also appears to have had the benefit of Vote Leave data and/or data it obtained via online resources set up and provided to it by Vote Leave to target and distribute its campaign material. This is shown by evidence from Facebook that Aggregate IQ used identical target lists for Vote Leave and Believe ads.
No, that's not what that shows.
So maybe you should have read the report if you wanted to disagree with it. You think that's fair?
Jeff has read the report, and I believe they have submitted a number of documents, and they have a dialogue going back and forth explaining just what exactly went on there, and they continue to work through it.
Okay. This is probably hopeful of me to ask, but have you read the Information Commissioner's report?
No.
Okay. So you're also unaware that that report references AIQ multiple times?
If you say so.
So in answer to Mr. Angus's questions, when you said AIQ is not referred to in the documents, maybe you should have said I didn't read the two specific reports from the Electoral Commission and from the ICO, and I don't know if they reference Aggregate IQ because I haven't read them, even though I'm the CEO of the company. That might have been the answer, right?
That's fair.
Okay. Okay. So in evidence handed to British politicians, Facebook wrote that it found certain billing and administration connections between AIQ and Cambridge Analytica. Can you shed some light on that?
I believe that was all from work we had done together in early 2015 with SEL during the midterms. The billing and administration item that they were referring to was they had given money to us to place ads. We were not able to get through all of the budget that they had assigned for that period, and we simply directed Facebook to refund the money directly to them, as opposed to us and back.
Remind me, who was your main point of contact at SCL?
For which line?
Well, so SCL was the bulk of your business, as I understand it, from your colleague, Mr. Sylvester, who knows far more about the business than you do. So who was your main point of contact at SCL for the bulk of the work that you did?
Sabita.
Okay. Have you ever done any work with Emmer Data?
No, I don't believe so.
Are you familiar with what that organization is?
No.
You've never heard of it before?
Are they the something that spun up after SEL and Cambridge Analytica in the UK.
It sounds like you have heard of them before. Have you ever done any work for them or been in contact with them?
No.
You've never been in contact with any of the individuals who are now part of Emerdata?
I couldn't tell you who was a part of Emerdata.
Okay. Have you ever done any further work for SCL?
No.
I'm going to leave it there, Mr. Massingham, but I'll say this at the end because, frankly, I haven't got any answers from you. You appeared before this committee and you lied. You're appearing before us again, and you're just not telling any part of the truth whatsoever. I can't say you're lying because I don't know if you've read the report, but if you haven't read the reports as the CEO of the company, you should be embarrassed of yourself.
I just got back to work and I'm not lying.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Erskine-Smith. Next up for 5 minutes, Mr. Gord.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur...
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Massingham, at the outset today, we talked about what your developers developed. You said, I understand you're not a developer, but this software that was developed, it was something that you marketed through your business. So what market was targeted by this software that was developed, that you put in place?
Please. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly.
Au début du témoignage.
At the beginning of your evidence today, we were talking about software and that you developed, but you said you weren't a developer, but nonetheless you put it on the market, that particular software. It was developed to target a certain market, certain services. So I'm asking you, what market and what services were targeted by your software?
And if I might ask, which software are you referring to? Because most, if not everything we do is custom development on spec from a client. So I'm just trying to answer as fully, as best I can.
OK, ça s'en vient.
Okay, we're getting somewhere. Your clients, do you have more than one potential client with the services that you offer in your business? Or do you work for a single client, or do you work for a broad spectrum of clients?
With clients, companies, and campaigns.
La propriété intellectuelle.
The intellectual property of that software that you were using to work with, who did that IP belong to?
Contract. The person paying us for the work wants the intellectual property, then it's theirs, and they own all of that work. In other instances, we have some of our own tools that we license.
OK, donc.
Okay, so those tools are patented, are they? They are licensed, and they are exclusive to the business to which they belong. Am I right?
OK, tout à l'heure, vous nous aviez dit que.
Earlier you said that you weren't aware of the source of data that you were working with. Are you aware of the data that you need to work? What type of data do you work with to develop the type of software that you made available to others?
In SEL, or none. In SEL's case, which is what I think you're asking about, I believe they had multiple sources of data from any number of vendors that they packaged and then used within the software product that we built for them.
Une source de données.
A source of data that might be of interest to you, could that, say, be the election lists, broadly speaking, in an election period?
Est-ce que vous aviez des données qui disaient que des...
Do you have data that might indicate that people between 18 and 38 years of age might be more likely to vote in a way that is different from the group of 35 to 55-year-olds?
Client is looking to see some sort of a score, then yes, that might be presented.
Est-ce que...
Does the age of the population, when we talk about the UK population, was that available on the election rolls there?
I believe so.
Donc,
So, if you used, if you tracked people by age, where did you get that information from?
People by age, Facebook and other ad networks certainly would have reported on interaction, what types of demographics were interacting with certain messages, which the campaigns would have used to make decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon.
merci.
So
Thank you.
just want to make the committee aware. I want to make about 10 minutes, 15 minutes available for committee business at the very end. Certainly, if we still have questions, we'll probably plow through that time and use it for questions, but I'd like to just let you know that that's the intent today. We just have to discuss a few witnesses, okay? Mr. Bayless, are you okay to go?
Thanks.
I was ragging the puck for you for a while, so yeah, go ahead for 5 minutes.
Mr. Massingham, how many times did you go to the UK in 2015?
I believe once.
How many times did you go to the UK in 2016?
Twice, 2 or 3 times.
How many times did Mr. Silver go in 2015?
I couldn't say.
How many times did Mr. Silver go in 2016?
I couldn't say.
Okay, when you went to the UK in 2015 or 16, did you meet with Vote Leave?
In 2016, during the referendum, I met with Vote Leave, but not before.
Did you meet with B Leave?
On that same trip, yes.
Did you meet with Veterans for Britain?
Yes, I did.
Did you meet with DUP?
Believe so, yes.
Okay. So for the questions that you couldn't answer, you weren't sure about, I'd like you to give me, you don't have to answer them right now. You can go through your files. I'm sure you have all that information. You'll be able to get it to me. Is that correct?
For travel?
Yeah. The dates you went and who you met on each travel trip.
And 2015 and 16.
2015 and 2016. All the trips that you took to the UK and who you met on each trip, and all the trips that Mr. Sylvester took and who he met, if he did take any. You get us all that information?
Yeah, to the best of my ability, yeah.
What do you mean to the best of your ability? Do you have it or you don't have it?
I believe I'll have all my travel. Meetings should be scheduled, so that should be fine.
Do you have it, yes or no? It's a simple question. Do you have it, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll expect it, thanks. Now, how many times did you meet with any one of those two groups together?
I'm sorry?
How many times did you meet with any one of those 4 groups together?
Never.
How many times did you meet them in the same building but not together?
I don't believe I ever did.
Okay, so when you said to a previous colleague that you don't know where B Leave's office is, but you did meet them, you had to physically meet them somewhere. Is that correct?
Yeah, I met Darren somewhere. I don't recall.
So
where.
you'll provide us with the exact place that you met each one of them, right?
I can try.
You can try. Do you have the information or not? I need to know because, I'm sure that you do your annual tax returns and you said you follow all the rules, and Revenue Canada would expect that. So do you have the information, yes or no?
I believe I have.
We need to know this. Do you have you followed, like just doing your Revenue Canada tax returns, when you take a business trip, you have to fill in certain stuff. Have you been doing that, yes or no?
Yes.
Then do you have the information, yes or no?
Yes.
Did you say yes, no, or guess?
No, sorry. I said yes. I'll go back through our emails.
So to be clear, you will get us all the information for your travel to UK, for Mr. Sylvester's travel to UK, who you met, when you met, and where you met.
Yeah, I will try to do that for you.
Okay, now where we seem to divest here is because this law firm called Binman's. Are you familiar with them?
No.
Okay, well, they've made claims that they have documents that show that you have been involved in sessions with both Believe and Vote Leave. Are they incorrect, or does that help jog your memory? Is it by chance that what this data that they have that shows that you were meeting together with Vote Leave and Believe at the same time, is it possible that you might have forgotten you've been sick?
No, I'm sure I didn't meet with either of them at the same time.
You never met with either of them at the same time?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, they say that they have evidence that shows that AIQ set up a Slack channel. This is a workspace where you allowed both campaigns to discuss their tactics for social media together. Did you do this, yes or no? They say they have evidence, so I'm just asking you.
No.
Okay. Now, if they have the evidence and then you're proven to be wrong, do you realize you're under oath? Are you aware of that?
I do realize that, yeah.
So is your position that the evidence that Bindham's has is incorrect?
I don't know what evidence they have. I just know.
Well, you don't need to know what evidence they have because you've made a blanket statement that it's not true. So I don't care what evidence. It has to be. Is it incorrect, yes or no?
So I only know what.
No, it's a simple question. It's a simple question. Is the information they have, whatever it may be, incorrect, yes or no? And you're under oath.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you again.
And
Chair, if I could just get this one answered, please. Listen, you said you never met with them together. That's a blanket statement. It doesn't matter if I have 10, 20, or 5,000 books worth of evidence that's incorrect. Is their evidence incorrect, yes or no?
We did not set up joint Slack.
I didn't ask. Mr. Massingham, I'm going to make it very easy for you. It starts with a Y, it means yes, or it starts with an N, means no. And you've been a yes or no man this whole time, so I'm giving you a yes or no question again. Yes or no? Now, you're under oath, Mr. Massingham.
I'm sorry, I can't answer a question.
Yeah, you can, actually. You can. If someone asks me, did I kill someone, and they got a ton of evidence, you know what I'm going to say? No. I don't care if they got a book's worth. No, I didn't do it. Now, I'm asking you a straight question. Is there evidence incorrect, yes or no?
We didn't set up.
I don't care. You don't need to.
As you just said, we didn't set up any Slack. We didn't coordinate any communications between those groups. We did not meet with them together.
That's wonderful. They have evidence. Is it incorrect? Yes or no? You haven't done nothing. So you've made a blanket statement. You've never done any coordination. So is the evidence they have, whatever it may be, incorrect? Yes or no?
Are you able to share with me?
I'm not able to share anything. You haven't been, I wouldn't bother anyways. You don't read the report, so I don't see any point in it. But anyhow, I'm asking you a straightforward question. You've made a blanket statement. You had no collusion, no work together, nothing. So if that's the case, who cares what their evidence has? Just tell me, Frank, it's wrong. It's no. No. It's wrong. Their information is wrong. Yes or no? Answer that simple question, please.
So we did not set up any
I didn't ask you that.
communications.
I didn't ask you that, and you're under oath. Now, we're going to get an answer out of you sooner or later. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but... please just answer me. You've made a very blanket statement. There's no collusion. You follow. This is your words. We're in full compliance of all legal and regulatory requirements of all jurisdictions we operate. That's your words. Simple question. Is there evidence incorrect? Yes or no?
I'm not going to comment on evidence I haven't seen. I can only tell you what we did, and we did not set up any of these.
Okay, we're going to
Chair,
continue.
if you could make sure that all that other evidence I asked for is provided to us.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll follow through. The clerk will follow through with that. So next up, for 5 minutes, Mr. Kent.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Massingham, coming back to this, to the issue of the data that you received in the form that you received it, were you aware or have you been made aware of Mr. Wiley's testimony before this committee on May 29th this year?
Only in parts.
Well, just to be specific, basically, and when you and Mr. Sylvester appeared before committee, you denied that the, well, again, as you did again this morning, that you didn't receive any raw data from improperly harvested by Facebook. But what Mr. Wiley said was you can't build a targeting platform that doesn't have access to data, because then what are you targeting? He said one of the things I provided, again, this is to the committee in Britain, is an email from AIQ that specifically references searching the SCL databases on the Ripon project. And Mr. Wiley concluded his answer by saying, frankly, I'm surprised and really disappointed that Jeff Sylvester and Zack Massingham have decided to try to obfuscate or hide what happened. You'll have to ask them why it is that they're taking this line, but in my view, this is Mr. Wiley's view, that's just not true. What value would they offer if they did not use any of the data? Can you answer that today?
So we built a software tool to present their data. We were like software developers for them. Their clients access various audiences to create lists, and we helped SCL service their clients that they had to help use the tool.
Well, now, when Mr. Sylvester testified in the UK, he described the Ripon tool as just something that would help door-to-door canvassing. Mr. Wiley had, again, a very different version of Ripon, saying that it was the software that utilized the algorithms from the Facebook data directly. How do you explain this contradiction between what Mr. Sylvester testified and Mr. Wiley testified?
The tool that we built for SEO was a plain and simple political CRM that contained SEL model data with scores, which would be a name and address, a phone number, sometimes an email, and then turnout propensity, or where you might rate along some issues, stuff like that. That's what was in the Ripon platform. Modeling didn't happen in Ripon. That happened, to the best of my understanding, all within SEL's ecosystem that they had built themselves, that took in all the data from various different vendors. What was put into Ripon is only the output of whatever they had done with that. Again, a simple political CRM.
So can you explain to the committee why you and Mr. Sylvester are so isolated in the testimony that you provide to us, that you provided to the British Office of the Information Commissioner, to the UK parliamentary study, and I assume to the BC Privacy Commissioner and the Canadian Privacy Commissioner? Why are you so isolated in the facts that you argue at odds to all of the other testimony and the findings of these other commissions, that in fact you've misrepresented what the company did?
I think it's because we're telling you the truth. The simple matter of this is that we're software developers. We're not modelers. We help our clients place ads sometimes. The spin that has been put on these proceedings and reports and findings isn't something we like to go through at all. And as you know, it's been quite difficult on me. And we would like to help you find the truth and to explain how everything works in our piece of that.
Are you saying that you and Mr. Sylvester are the fall guys, that the others have lied about what AIQ is and what it's done?
I don't believe we're fall guys. I simply think there's a misunderstanding of what it is that we have done and have built for SEL or others.
Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. Next up, Ms. Forte.
Bonjour, monsieur. Hello, Mr. Massingham. I want you to know that I normally ask questions in French, but today, despite the fact that we have excellent, hardworking interpreters, I don't want to lose time. I'll ask my questions in English.
This opportunity, like many of my colleagues here, to reiterate my frustration with your communication with the chair and the clerk of this committee. You've mentioned on numerous occasions your desire to cooperate fully with this committee and our study, and I will tell you that my belief has been tested. And when you did not appear last spring before us, I was very disappointed. So I'm hoping today we have a conversation where I get answers. With that said, I'm hopeful you'll be able to add some clarity to specific questions. And I'll start with, if you may, how many emails addresses do you possess? Did you have a Believe email address? Did you have any specific? No. I'm not done. Did you have any specific Aggregate IQ or Gmail or any other domain emails that were specifically for this identified campaign?
For Believe?
Yep.
No, I did not have a Believe email address.
Did you have any other related to discuss this Believe campaign?
No.
Nothing?
No.
Thank you. Now I would like to start by getting an understanding on how you invoiced and created insertion orders for the Believe campaign and the lead up to the Brexit vote in 2016. Since you have provided us with the number of invoices that I have with me today and insertion orders, can you tell me how it was the invoicing and the insertion process worked with the Believe campaign, and specifically what directions you were given on how and where this was documented and how the services were delivered?
Believe let us know that they have received a donation, that they would like to engage us in our services. We had a discussion with Mr. Brown about what it was he would like to accomplish with the money that he had been given. The types of messaging he'd like to run, various creatives, what his thoughts were on tone and style and audience, different channels that he might like to use, and what he might want to do as any sort of get out the vote effort.
And why would you have? Thank you. Why would you have multiple insertion orders for a period of for the same time period? Specifically, I'm talking about the June 14th to 23rd, 2016.
As I said at the beginning of that answer, they were tied to the donations that he received. So as he received additional money, additional insertion orders were created that we might use as some record of that transaction.
And didn't it seem odd to you that a campaign wouldn't have an overall budget for digital advertising? And did it not raise any flags that they were wiring you larger and larger amounts without explanation of where that came from?
No, fundraising in campaigns tends to go that way.
Really? You provided this committee, as I was saying earlier, copies of the invoices, as we have discussed, and these were the copies of the original invoices, correct?
I believe so.
Your name are on it, so I'm hoping that you know about them.
I do.
Can you explain to this committee why there's an invoice with your signature on it dated April 30th, 2018 for over $500,000 US, nearly 2 years after the Brexit vote and months after this and other similar committees were struck across the globe?
It's a Word document, and with the template that we use has a auto-populate the date. So as they were submitted, I imagine that they were open to verify that it was what it was, and then submitted to you, and that would have updated that date.
So they weren't originals that we received?
They were Word documents that were sent to you that we opened to review, that yes, this is what we had sent the client, and then as they were opened, they must have updated itself.
I'm still surprised to see that one is 218 and the rest is 216. So I don't believe we received the originals. I'd love to have an explanation.
I think I just did. If they were PDFs, I'm sure we wouldn't have had this problem.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Next up for 3 minutes, and what we're going to do, 3 minutes, Mr. Angus is going to have the last question of this round. We'll go through another round until our 15-minute timeline. So go ahead, Mr. Angus, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Massingham. We spent a lot of time the last time you were here trying to clarify why you were listed as the head of SCL Canada, trying to track why you had a phone for SCL Canada, and you explained to us that AIQ is an independent Canadian entity. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're the CEO of Aggregate IQ, correct? So
correct.
Who else is involved in the corporate structure of Aggregate IQ?
As we've said, it's myself and Jeff Sylvester.
Is there anyone else involved?
Yes.
And who would they be?
I'd be happy to submit our corporate structure to you following this proceeding.
Are there other people who are involved in the corporate structure of Aggregate IQ?
Yep, there are other shareholders, and I'd be happy to get you that document that outlines that.
So shareholders or key people in the corporate board. Do you have a corporate structure?
No.
Okay. So who is Matt Watson?
I'm sorry.
Matt Watson?
He was just a mentor of mine.
Just a mentor? He's not involved in Aggregate IQ?
No.
Okay. Chris Shannon? Who's Chris Shannon?
A colleague.
A colleague.
He's a friend for a long time.
Okay. And is he involved in the corporate structure of Aggregate IQ?
Yes, he is.
Okay. And what is Chris Shannon's role with Aggregate IQ?
He's a contractor resource for development.
Contractor for resource development. Was he involved in any way in the Brexit issues?
Yeah.
Okay. Because we've been led to believe that it was just you and Jeff, so we have Chris Shannon as well. And we have Matt Watson, who is a mentor, but you're saying is not involved in the corporate structure of Aggregate IQ.
That's correct.
Okay. So you would not have a problem giving us the corporate structure of Aggregate IQ so that we can verify these?
As I said, I'll provide that to you.
Okay, great. So what role did Chris Shannon play in the Brexit campaign with Believe and Vote Leave?
Just developer, and only for Vote Leave. He had no part in Believe.
Sorry, only for what?
Vote Leave. He had no part in Believe.
No vote in Believe. Okay, so your shareholders, do you meet?
Like once a year.
Once a year, okay. And how many shareholders do you have?
3.
3. And who are those shareholders?
Myself, Jeff Sylvester, and Mr. Shannon.
Mr. Shannon, okay. So, do you know if Mr. Shannon has read the UK reports from the Information Commissioner and the Electoral Commission?
I couldn't say.
Okay, you couldn't say. But as CEO, I just want to quickly, just before we go, because I'm very confused about this issue that in 6 days, $1 million Canadian went through the Believe campaign, and the commission is clear. It says Believe did not go on to run any ads, and you said you were running ads. They said that this was a money laundering vehicle to circumvent the law. So if you were running ads, were you running Vote Leave's ads with the money from Believe?
No, all ad budgets were kept separate. All ad accounts were kept separate. Their money was their own.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. We're going to go through a new round here, starting with Ms. Vandenbilt.
Thank you very much. I'm very concerned about the fact that in your testimony, you make certain statements, and then when evidence is provided that those statements are not correct, then you alter those statements, but you're still not particularly forthcoming on this. So, for example, when I asked Mr. Sylvester about the psychosocial profiles that were used on who to target the ads to, and if AIQ still had any of those data or scores in your databases, he said, "We're not a data company, so we have no interest in any of that." Now, the UK Information Commissioner's Office has now actually issued an enforcement notice asking you to stop handling the data of UK citizens. So clearly, we know that you are handling data. And today, you said that that there was data from SCL, but you have absolutely no idea what the source of that data is. So are you in possession, or were you in possession of large amounts of data that include some form, rankings, or some information that was derived from the Facebook breaches?
To say that they were derived from Facebook breaches, I could not be certain. I know that SCL worked with a number of data vendors and did their own modeling to create a data set that would be used within the Ripon platform itself. On the matter of the ICO enforcement notice, the only data that was there was something akin to 1,000 email addresses. No scores, nothing else like that. It might be a name and an email address. That was it, just for your understanding of that.
Okay, so...
And none of which had to do anything with any referendum client.
Okay. I want to go back to what your business model is, because if all you're doing is taking email addresses, putting it on Facebook and targeting ads, you're basically taking $1 million and you're being paid just to put ads on Facebook, which is something any intern could probably do. Now, today, it's been proven that, in fact, the UK says there were no ads placed for Believe. So now, I heard you say earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you instructed Facebook to return the money?
So that was going back to a previous point in time when we were working with SCL during the U.S. midterms. SCL had provided an advertising budget for their clients. The ad budget wasn't able to be spent at the campaign period, and SCL had requested that we send the money back. So what we had asked was that Facebook simply send the money back to SCL.
Okay, so we're specifically talking about Believe, and according to the UK Electoral Commission, Believe never actually placed ads, and yet you're saying that you used that $1 million to place ads for Believe. So that's not what you're talking about when you say you asked Facebook to return the money. You're still saying that you placed ads. Okay, so we have another contradiction there with other evidence, which seems to be a pattern here.
So the report I have seen from Facebook says that Believe and Believe's ad account did place ads, which is why I'm very confused as to how these other regulatory bodies can interpret that any other way.
Okay, I want to go back to the questions about you said you have no evidence of coordination between Vote Leave and Believe. And yet we have significant amounts of evidence that we have access to here in the committee that shows that, in fact, you did. You had meetings, you were in strategy sessions, there's a Slack channel, we had a Google Drive. So you're saying that you have no idea about evidence when you were answering the question from my colleague. I'm going to ask you very, very simply, are you aware of any money or any data that moved between Vote Leave and Believe?
No, other than the donation that Vote Leave made to Believe.
Okay, so you're not aware, and nor did you participate in coordinating any data moving between those two?
There was no data that was moved between those two organizations,
Okay.
as far as I saw.
Okay, I'm gonna share my time with Mr. Saini.
So, Mr. Massingham, I'm just going to ask some very simple questions. It's nothing to do with any of the things we're discussing. I just want to get an idea of your role. So, you and Mr. Sylvester started this company. Is that true?
That's correct.
And you're the only two principals of this company?
That's correct.
Okay. What is Mr. Sylvester's qualifications? Does he have any post-secondary education?
I believe so, yeah.
And what did he study?
Engineering.
Engineering.
Yeah.
Engineering, okay. And what's your qualifications? What's your post-secondary education?
Business.
Business, okay. So that would have included courses in contracts, courses in finance, courses in accounting, courses in marketing, the general gamut of business.
Correct.
Okay. So you have a business background. Mr. Sylvester has an account as a engineering computer background, so you decide to open this company. Right?
Yes.
Okay. And what was Mr. Sylvester's title in this company?
He's the Chief Operating Officer.
Chief Operating Officer. And what is your title in this company?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Okay. So when you receive a contract from a client, whether you're doing work directly with the client or indirectly with the client, who would analyze that contract? So you would be requested to do something. So tell me if I'm wrong. You'd be requested to do some work. It would probably involve engineering or computer programming or whatever. So that would go to Mr. Sylvester. He would analyze it and tell you, look, Zach, I think we can do this work. You'd get a scope of work that was involved, and you would respond. You would respond with, yes, we can do it. Yes, this is our price. Is that correct?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay. So what was your role then? When you say for the most part, I want to know what your role in the company was.
So on the logistics side, the looking at tools, what things ought to cost, what the comparables are, doing the market research, understanding the needs of the particular clients and then the needs of the particular users who might be using the product or the service thereafter.
So you were the person who would be dealing directly with the client?
On the sales side, yeah.
On the sales side. So when you have the scope of work and you're asked to do some work, do you analyze what the sort of proprietary, or what the I guess the value of that work is, or what the purpose of that work is, how that work would be used? Or is it just simply that whatever client asks you to do, you just fulfill that request and here's our price? Because I asked you earlier in my testimony, earlier in my questioning, that, were you aware of work being done in Ukraine? Now, you've also said, or Mr. Sylvester has said, that you've done work in Trinidad, you've done work in Nigeria. I'm just wondering that when you get a contract to do work, whether directly or indirectly, do you analyze the contract to see where that work is going to happen? Or is that just something you guys just don't think about?
No, we absolutely do.
You absolutely do. So when I asked you, are you doing work in Ukraine? You said no, right? You have no employees in Ukraine doing any work. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, so you're doing work indirectly.
Mr. Saini, you're a minute.
Okay.
It's okay. Yeah, I have to stop you. Great questions, though. 7 minutes, Mr. Gord.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur Massi.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Massingham, I'm going to pay you a compliment because your business offers international services. Canada, we're a smallish country, but to be able to develop the type of tools that you have done and then to offer these tools to a major country like Great Britain, that is something that is quite unusual. Your business is a marketing success story. how did you succeed in penetrating the UK market? By offering value added for services for certain companies in Great Britain that probably could do the same type of work, but you did something special. You must have offered something special, something value added for your clients to hire you.
I think we've been extraordinarily lucky in terms of the opportunities that we've had, and we've worked with some really great people that have gone from campaign to campaign. And it's really through word of mouth that we get our introductions. The campaigning community is a very small community, as you'll know. And we like to believe we put together a very good team that delivers very good work and results for our clients. Aside from that, we don't really, aside from word of mouth, we don't really do any other advertising. And in particular in the UK, I point out that we don't have any clients in the UK right now.
So, word of mouth, advertising, and knowledge. Is it possible that in that knowledge there are some people who might have come from the UK to work in other elections in Canada, and in that instance perhaps they helped you penetrate the UK market?
Don't believe so.
But you've just really said the opposite. You said it was through word of mouth, knowledge that people had of your work, that there was a value-added dimension to your work. Earlier, you were talking about a simple type of software that included names, addresses, telephone numbers, and yes or no, you're for or against this or that. That type of information exists elsewhere in other countries, but you must have been offering something more value added to have your services recommended. So what was that value added when you went to see them directly?
Simply the hard work. The reason I said no was I could not think of an individual that we had worked with in Canada. Had you said someone that we had worked with in America, I would have said yes. Because the number of people and the scope of what we've helped with there is much different than what we've worked on here in Canada.
Donc, les outils.
So the American tools are more in the forefront, better developed than what can exist elsewhere in the world, and you had access to that, and that allowed you to develop certain tools with the Americans better than, say, you would have been able to do for only the Canadian market, because there's more money in the States in terms of development.
Yes, and I think just to extend that a bit further, it's simply a matter of scale. You're exposed to a much larger audience in America, and you're able to see things and work on things much faster than.
Next up for 3 minutes, and what we're going to do, 3 minutes, Mr. Angus is going to have the last question of this round. We'll go through another round until our 15-minute timeline. So go ahead, Mr. Angus, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Massingham. We spent a lot of time the last time you were here trying to clarify why you were listed as the head of SCL Canada, trying to track why you had a phone for SCL Canada, and you explained to us that AIQ is an independent Canadian entity. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're the CEO of Aggregate IQ, correct? So
correct.
Who else is involved in the corporate structure of Aggregate IQ?
As we've said, it's myself and Jeff Sylvester.
Is there anyone else involved?
Yes.
And who would they be?
I'd be happy to submit our corporate structure to you following this proceeding.
Are there other people who are involved in the corporate structure of Aggregate IQ?
Yeah, there are other shareholders, and I'd be happy to get you that document that outlines that.
So shareholders or key people in the corporate board. Do you have a corporate structure?
No.
Okay. So who is Matt Watson?
I'm sorry.
Matt Watson?
He was just a mentor of mine.
Just a mentor? He's not involved in Aggregate IQ?
No.
Okay. Chris Shannon? Who's Chris Shannon?
A colleague.
A colleague.
He's a friend for a long time.
Okay. And is he involved in the corporate structure of Aggregate IQ?
Yes, he is.
Okay, and what is Chris Shannon's role with Aggregate IQ?
He's a contractor resource for development.
Contractor for resource development. Was he involved in any way in the Brexit issues?
Yeah.
Okay. Because we've been led to believe that it was just you and Jeff, so we have Chris Shannon as well. And we have Matt Watson, who is a mentor, but you're saying is not involved in the corporate structure of Aggregate IQ.
That's correct.
Okay. So you would not have a problem giving us the corporate structure of Aggregate IQ so that we can verify these?
As I said, I'll provide that to you.
Okay, great. So what role did Chris Shannon play in the Brexit campaign with Believe and Vote Leave?
Just developer, and only for Vote Leave. He had no part in Believe.
Sorry, only for what?
Vote Leave. He had no part in Believe.
No vote in Believe. Okay, so your shareholders, do you meet?
Like once a year.
Once a year, okay. And how many shareholders do you have?
3.
3. And who are those shareholders?
Like myself, Jeff Sylvester, and Mr. Shannon.
Mr. Shannon, okay. So, do you know if Mr. Shannon has read the UK reports from the Information Commissioner and the Electoral Commission?
I couldn't say.
Okay, you couldn't say. But as CEO, I just want to quickly, just before we go, because I'm very confused about this issue that in 6 days, $1 million Canadian went through the Believe campaign, and the commission is clear. It says Believe did not go on to run any ads, and you said you were running ads. They said that this was a money laundering vehicle to circumvent the law. So if you were running ads, were you running Vote Leave's ads with the money from Believe?
No, all ad budgets were kept separate. All ad accounts were kept separate. Their money was their own.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. We're going to go through a new round here, starting with Ms. Vandenbilt.
Thank you very much. I'm very concerned about the fact that in your testimony, you make certain statements, and then when evidence is provided that those statements are not correct, then you alter those statements, but you're still not particularly forthcoming on this. So, for example, when I asked Mr. Sylvester about the psychosocial profiles that were used on who to target the ads to, and if AIQ still had any of those data or scores in your databases, he said, "We're not a data company, so we have no interest in any of that." Now, the UK Information Commissioner's Office has now actually issued an enforcement notice asking you to stop handling the data of UK citizens. So clearly, we know that you are handling data. And today, you said that that there was data from SCL, but you have absolutely no idea what the source of that data is. So are you in possession, or were you in possession of large amounts of data that include some form, rankings, or some information that was derived from the Facebook breaches?
To say that they were derived from Facebook breaches, I could not be certain. I know that SCL worked with a number of data vendors and did their own modeling to create a data set that would be used within the Ripon platform itself. On the matter of the ICO enforcement notice, the only data that was there was something akin to 1,000 email addresses. No scores, nothing else like that. It might be a name and an email address. That was it, just for your understanding of that.
Okay, so...
And none of which had to do anything with any referendum client.
Okay. I want to go back to what your business model is, because if all you're doing is taking email addresses, putting it on Facebook and targeting ads, you're basically taking $1 million and you're being paid just to put ads on Facebook, which is something any intern could probably do. Now, today, it's been proven that, in fact, the UK says there were no ads placed for Believe. So now, I heard you say earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you instructed Facebook to return the money?
So that was going back to a previous point in time when we were working with SEL during the U.S. midterms. SEL had provided an advertising budget for their clients. The ad budget wasn't able to be spent at the campaign period, and SEL had requested that we send the money back. So what we had asked was that Facebook simply send the money back to SEL.
Okay, so we're specifically talking about Believe. And according to the UK Electoral Commission, Believe never actually placed ads. And yet you're saying that you used that $1 million to place ads for Believe. So that's not what you're talking about when you say you asked Facebook to return the money. You're still saying that you placed ads. Okay, so we have another contradiction there with other evidence, which seems to be a pattern here.
So the report I have seen from Facebook says that Believe and Believe's ad account did place ads, which is why I'm very confused as to how these other regulatory bodies can interpret that any other way.
Okay, I want to go back to the questions about you said you have no evidence of coordination between Vote Leave and Believe. And yet we have significant amounts of evidence that we have access to here in the committee that shows that, in fact, you did. You had meetings, you were in strategy sessions, there's a Slack channel, we had a Google Drive. So you're saying that you have no idea about evidence when you were answering the question from my colleague. I'm going to ask you very, very simply. Are you aware of any money or any data that moved between Vote Leave and Believe?
No, other than the donation that Vote Leave made to Believe.
Okay, so you're not aware, and nor did you participate in coordinating any data moving between those two?
There was no data that was moved between those two organizations, as far as I saw.
Okay, I'm gonna share my time with Mr. Saini.
So, Mr. Massingham, I'm just going to ask some very simple questions. It's nothing to do with any of the things we're discussing. I just want to get an idea of your role. So, you and Mr. Sylvester started this company. Is that true?
That's correct.
And you're the only two principals of this company?
That's correct.
Okay. What is Mr. Sylvester's qualifications? Does he have any post-secondary education?
I believe so, yeah.
And what did he study?
Engineering.
Engineering.
Yeah.
Engineering, okay. And what's your qualifications? What's your post-secondary education?
Business.
Business, okay. So that would have included courses in contracts, courses in finance, courses in accounting, courses in marketing, the general gamut of business.
Correct.
Okay. So you have a business background. Mr. Sylvester has an engineering computer background, so you decide to open this company. Right?
Yes.
Okay. And what was Mr. Sylvester's title in this company?
He's the Chief Operating Officer.
Chief Operating Officer. And what is your title in this company?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Okay. So when you receive a contract from a client, whether you're doing work directly with the client or indirectly with the client, who would analyze that contract? So you would be requested to do something. So tell me if I'm wrong. You'd be requested to do some work. It would probably involve engineering or computer programming or whatever. So that would go to Mr. Sylvester. He would analyze it and tell you, look, Zack, I think we can do this work. You'd get a scope of work that was involved, and you would respond. You would respond with, yes, we can do it. Yes, this is our price. Is that correct?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay. So what was your role then? When you say for the most part, I want to know what your role in the company was.
So on the logistics side, the looking at tools, what things ought to cost, what the comparables are, doing the market research, understanding the needs of the particular clients and then the needs of the particular users who might be using the product or the service thereafter.
So you were the person who would be dealing directly with the client?
On the sales side, yeah.
On the sales side. So when you have the scope of work and you're asked to do some work, do you analyze what the sort of proprietary, or what the I guess the value of that work is, or what the purpose of that work is, how that work would be used? Or is it just simply that whatever client asks you to do, you just fulfill that request and here's our price? Because I asked you earlier in my testimony, earlier in my questioning, that, were you aware of work being done in Ukraine? Now, you've also said, or Mr. Sylvester has said, that you've done work in Trinidad, you've done work in Nigeria. I'm just wondering that when you get a contract to do work, whether directly or indirectly, do you analyze the contract to see where that work is going to happen? Or is that just something you guys just don't think about?
No, we absolutely do.
You absolutely do. So when I asked you, are you doing work in Ukraine? You said no, right? You have no employees in Ukraine doing any work. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, so you're doing work indirectly.
Mr. Saini, you're a minute.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I have to stop you. Great questions, though. 7 minutes, Mr. Gord.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur Massi.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Massingham, I'm going to pay you a compliment because your business offers international services. Canada, we're a smallish country, but to be able to develop the type of tools that you have done and then to offer these tools to a major country like Great Britain, that is something that is quite unusual. Your business is a marketing success story. How did you succeed in penetrating the UK market? By offering value added for services for certain companies in Great Britain that probably could do the same type of work, but you did something special. You must have offered something special, something value added for your clients to hire you.
I think we've been extraordinarily lucky in terms of the opportunities that we've had, and we've worked with some really great people that have gone from campaign to campaign. And it's really through word of mouth that we get our introductions. The campaigning community is a very small community, as you'll know. And we like to believe we put together a very good team that delivers very good working results for our clients. Aside from that, aside from word of mouth, we don't really do any other advertising. And in particular in the UK, I point out that we don't have any clients in the UK right now.
So, word of mouth, advertising, and knowledge. Is it possible that in that knowledge there are some people who might have come from the UK to work in other elections in Canada, and in that instance, perhaps they helped you penetrate the UK market?
Don't believe so.
But you've just really said the opposite. You said it was through word of mouth, knowledge that people had of your work, that there was a value-added dimension to your work. Earlier, you were talking about a simple type of software that included names, addresses, telephone numbers, and yes or no, you're for or against this or that. That type of information exists elsewhere in other countries, but you must have been offering something more value added to have your services recommended. So what was that value added when you went to see them directly?
Simply the hard work. The reason I said no was I could not think of an individual that we had worked with in Canada. Had you said someone that we had worked with in America, I would have said yes. because the number of people in the scope of what we've helped with there is much different than what we've worked on here in Canada.
Donc, les outils.
So the American tools are more in the forefront, better developed than what can exist elsewhere in the world, and you had access to that, and that allowed you to develop certain tools with the Americans better than, say, you would have been able to do for only the Canadian market, because there's more money in the States in terms of development.
Yes, and I think just to extend that a bit further, it's simply a matter of scale. You're exposed to a much larger audience in America, and you're able to see things and work on things much faster than what campaign practices might be here in Canada or in the UK or elsewhere around the world. It's really in America, there's much more opportunity to be exposed to that scale, which allows us to work with other people that can see how we work and how we help them. And it's those people that oftentimes introduce us to other campaigns.
Est-ce que les outils que vous avez développés?
The tools that you've already developed in your company, are they replicas of tools that exist in the United States? Are there contracts that you might have held that would have allowed you to develop tools that would be even more developed than what already exists in the United States?
I don't believe so. As solution providers to campaigns, we look at all sorts of tools, and we will recommend to our clients that perhaps what we offer isn't the best, but we will certainly help them use something else, because it's about them winning and being able to use the tool, the strategy, the canvassing application with their volunteers and with their staff in the best way possible, so that they're able to reach as many people as possible.
Une dernière question me reste.
One last question. I have a minute left. In the $1 million contract, it seems to be an awful lot of money to me for what you had to do. But during a campaign that, say, that was absolutely dead set on winning, what could you do with $1 million? And yet you only worked 2 or 3 days. Were you overpaid by these people for the services you gave them?
Majority of that $1 million went into buying tens of millions of online ads for Believe.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Massingham. Thanks for clarifying on the corporate structure and the role that Chris Shannon, who you say is your third partner, but you say Matt Watson is not part of the corporate structure of Aggregate IQ. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. He was a mentor to you, you said.
Yes.
Okay. Was he involved in the establishment of Aggregate IQ?
No. Jeff and I incorporated Aggregate IQ.
So Matt's doesn't have any connection?
No,
Okay.
other than being a mentor to me.
Who is Hunter Watson?
Matthew's son.
Okay. So Matt's son is Hunter Watson.
That's correct.
Is Hunter Watson involved in Aggregate IQ?
No. He was a co-op employee of ours.
He was a co-op employee. So he has access to the AIQ database. Poof. Poof. Oh my God! Damn you, Putin!
So I would just ask if Watson has ever been. What? I would ask if Watson has ever been.
1 minute until we get the feedback on. So if you need to take a little break, we'll even give you a couple minutes. So we'll call the meeting back to order. Continue, Mr. Angus. You've only used up a minute of your time, so proceed.
Well, welcome back, Mr. Massingham. We were deeply worried we'd lost you.
Thank you.
So we were asking about Hunter Watson, who is in the aggregate IQ database, correct?
How do you mean database?
Well, that in your aggregate IQ database access, one of the access people is Hunter Watson. Is that not correct?
Do you mean Git?
I'm not a technical guy. My job is getting Mrs.
nor
O'Grady's
am I.
hydro turned back on in the morning when she's cut off. I just want to know is like in access to your company server that was open that had all the issues that led to this question of the Facebook issue. Hunter Watson has got rights in that. Is that correct?
Presumably, yeah. He was a co-op employee of ours.
Okay. So was Matt Watson ever a shareholder?
Yes.
Okay, so he was a shareholder.
Yes, but not now.
Not now. And when did he stop being a shareholder?
I don't have that exact date, but I'm sure that will be reflected in the document that I sent you.
But there were only four of you. There was you, Chris Shannon, Jeff Sylvester, Matt Watson. One of the four left. So when did he leave?
I'm not sure of the exact date, but I'm sure that will be in the document we provide.
Just as a side, are you alone in the room? Are you getting coaching? Are you with somebody? Someone there with you?
My lawyer's here.
Your lawyer? Okay. Is Jeff Sylvester there?
Yes, he is.
Okay, good. Is Mr. Shannon there?
No, he's not.
Okay, good. I'm interested in July 2017, you responded over a journalist's request for information about the contract between Vote Leave and your company Aggregate IQ. And your request for an exemption was that you had bespoke terms with Vote Leave, and you were worried that may differ from other clients and it could impact the commercial arrangements with other clients. So what were the bespoke terms with Vote Leave?
I'm sorry, can you help me out a bit there?
Yeah, July 2017, there was a journalist request for the contract. And under the British Freedom of Information laws, you were looking to get an exemption because you were afraid that contract would undermine your competitive bidding because, quote, where the pricing reflects bespoke terms, it may differ from those offered to other clients and could impact commercial arrangements with other clients. So did you have those bespoke terms with Vote Leave?
The pricing depends on the scope of work that we undertake for each of our clients.
But if you had specific terms that were different, then it could affect your overall commercial viability. So what were the bespoke terms of Vote Leave?
Simply what's been invoiced for. There's nothing special about that.
Okay.
It's simply the number.
Okay, because in that same email exchange, you thanked Dominic Cummings of Vote Leave for his, quote, speedy help. What was the speedy help that he gave you in response to this request for the contract?
I'm not sure.
Well, he gave you speedy help. You were looking for help. It was about a journalist freedom of information request about that contract. What did Dominic Cummings give you speedy help? Did he give you the language on the bespoke terms response?
No, I don't believe so. And I also don't recall what I might have asked him.
Okay, I don't want to keep going down rabbit holes, and we could have other things to speak about. But would it, if our committee asks for the contract between Vote Leave and Believe, you'd be willing to hand that over to us?
The contract between Vote Leave and Believe?
Your contract with Vote Leave and your contract with Believe, you would be willing to turn those contracts over to our committee?
Yeah, I believe we can give you everything that we've got there.
Good, because the question here is that we have two independent reports that have found a breach of a British electoral law and a serious breach that undermined the Brexit vote, which is causing ongoing economic and social upheaval in the United Kingdom. We see that there was coordination between those two campaigns. That's been proven. We have the Slack channels between Believe and Vote Leave. We have the Google Drive between the two campaigns. You're involved in both of those. We have the transfer of money between two campaigns. You're involved in those. There were meetings between two campaigns that you were involved in. Mark Gettleson, who was the Vote Leave, one of the key Vote Leave people, is the guy who brought you into Believe, and yet you say that you don't know how there could be any coordination that broke the law. This has put your company in a legally vulnerable position. Don't you think, for all that money, you would have done some due diligence?
I'm sorry, just to correct you, Mark Gettleson introduced us to Vote Leave, and that was the end of his involvement.
That was the end of his involvement. But all the others, even if we concede that one, all the others that they found, point after point, the two, we keep coming back to where the illegal coordination was done. It keeps coming back to aggregate IQ. And you're saying that you had no knowledge of that because Christopher Wiley said that aggregate IQ inherited a company culture of total disregard for the law. We have Jeff Sylvester being quoted through Chris Wiley that there was no signing, that what you did was known to be illegal, and yet you're telling us that you were either the most naive people who ever walked the planet, who walked out with all that money in the midst of an illegal campaign, or you're not telling us the truth. So just to end this, you're protected here, Mr. Massingham. Whatever you tell us cannot be used in court against you, but you put your shareholders and your company in a legally vulnerable position. So if you had to do it all over again, I mean, what are you going to tell us?
The advice that the Electoral Commission gave Vote Leave at the time was that that donation was allowed. They have since ruled that it is not. And I know that
They didn't say that it wasn't allowed. They said that they were coordinating, that it was illegal activity between the two, and you are the conduit between the two. That's what they ruled.
I'm sorry,
they didn't change their mind. They said that what was illegal was the coordinating, and you are the connecting link.
Certainly, we did not see any evidence of coordination between those two organizations.
Thank you, Mr. Angus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. Give a bit more time just because of the break. I just had a question for you, Mr. Massingham. Who's in the room with you currently?
Michelle, our lawyer, and Jeff Sylvester.
Okay, that's all that's in the room with you?
That's all.
And the room that you're in currently is in what building? Where are you at currently now?
In Vancouver, at our lawyer's office.
Okay, thank you. Just next up for 7 minutes, Mr. Picard.
My name is Mike. Let's forget about third parties' comment and impressions and focus on what you do best, software development. You explained to us that the product that you worked on is comparable to a kind of CRM type product. A CRM type product, there's a number of those products on the market. Are those actual available products are as flexible as, I should say, like an SAP type tool where you tailored all the functionalities to the requirements to the client? Or are the CRM type product on the market too restricted and therefore cannot meet the requirements of your client and justify the fact that you have to develop your own software?
I think what we've seen from working with organizations is that the scope of work sometimes changes quite quickly based on new tools that they want to use, and having a more open system that's able to integrate with other products or tools or services actually has its advantages.
What are the biggest changes you may give me as an example? Because at the end of the day, in marketing, you need to know possibly I go without any specific importance or priority, name, addresses, where you live, the books you read, and stuff like that. Are there a significant element that cannot be provided by actual available tools on the market?
I'm sorry, can you clarify that?
Well, for example, okay, I'll ask the question differently. Why didn't you use a CRM type product already available on the market and just fine-tune it for the requirements of your client?
We have done that in the past. Certainly, we did that in Trinidad and Tobago. We used a product for them based on Civi CRM, which is an open source piece of software. We have also suggested that clients use Nation Builder because it's a fantastic piece of software that volunteers can use quite readily. The reporting out of Nation Builder leaves a lot to be desired, which is why some clients want other outside reporting functionality. And then there's still some campaigns that operate out of paper. So you see the gambit based on the volunteers and the staff that you have available. And where we come in is we help those campaigns and their staff make solid technology decisions to help match the tools with their engagement strategies and available resources.
So your involvement, was it to fine-tune something already available on the market, or you started from scratch based on known codes, but you develop your own software that can be similar to what exists with your own touch?
Certainly some of the products that we've developed for ourselves, yes. We've taken the experience of that learning that we've seen using other commercially available products.
How do you define the personal touch you have? Who decides what kind of personal touch you add to the software when you build such a software? Because you have to, you don't go by the flavor of the month. You need to add what is in fact required by the client, or at least make sure that what you add to the software or what you develop yourself will meet exactly the purpose or the requirement of your client.
I think our internal development process really starts from one of recognizing what are the common questions that our clients are asking.
So in order to do so, you have to understand your client's business.
Correct.
So by understanding the client's business, you understand the use of the result product and the product that you're going to supply and the use of it. So you understand what you're going to do with that.
And what their users are experiencing while they're doing it, or while they're using it.
What kind of, can you summarize to me in your contract what kind of agreement you have, or what kind of clause you have to protect yourself, not the others, just yourself, against malpractice and misuse of your own product?
Which product? Any product?
Yeah, because you give the tool to someone. If you sell me a hammer and I go on the street starting hitting people, you won't like being identified to the hammer you sold me.
That's fair.
Yeah.
The tools that we have produced and licensed have been, again, as I've said, rather generic. The implementation of that, how they work with particular clients, is what adds the value to that. The overall solution is what adds value. To have a clause in a contract for a generic tool such as a hammer, I can't say that one exists in our documents.
And Brexit and leave, the vote leave or other group, would you categorize the tool you sold as a very generic tool?
We didn't provide them with any tools. We provided advertising services to Vote Leave, and we helped them with some small development work of their own tool that they had been developing long before we got there.
So it's fair to say that by developing the tool for the specific requirement of your client, you accompany your client along the way, understanding what they want and where they're going.
Yeah, I think there's learning on both sides there, both from what they think they want, and then from when the rubber hits the road, the reality of it is users still have to be able to use this. Your volunteers still need to be able to enter in, their pledges and such.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Picard. Next up for 5 minutes, Mr. Kent.
Thank you. I'd like to come back, Mr. Massingham, to the report of the UK parliamentary investigation and a piece of information that sort of widens our discussion here. The committee report says, we have also found evidence that AIQ used tools that could scrape user profile data from LinkedIn. The app, this report says, acts similarly to online human behavior, searching LinkedIn user profiles, scraping their contacts, and all accompanying information such as a user's place of work location and job title. Is that true?
Sorry, can you go back to the start of that question? Which part is true?
Well, the British Parliamentary Commission says that they have evidence, and I guess we may hear more about this as their investigation continues and they get to their final report sometime this fall. But they say we have evidence that AIQ used tools that could scrape user profile data from LinkedIn, and then it goes on to say how that it acted similarly to online human behavior, searched LinkedIn user profiles, scraping contacts, places of work, other identities. Did you develop that app?
I don't believe, but Jeff would probably be the best person to speak to about what is in our Git repository. I know that within our Git repository there was a number of items that were either in progress or open source tools that our developers were looking at to experiment with, or things of that nature. But I couldn't speak to the particular functionality of what it is that you're.
But your company is working on the development of data harvesting from social media.
No.
That would seem to be what the UK Parliamentary Committee has concluded.
I think that's a mischaracterization of what might be there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. Next up, and it'll be our last questioner of the day, Mr. Erskine-Smith.
So I'm not going to ask you what you read this time, but I am going to ask you, when you receive information, so let's take the Vote Leave campaign. When you receive information, and you mentioned it's not sort of raw information from Facebook, as it were, what format do you receive the information
in? Generally, or?
In that particular instance.
Oh, in Vote Leave? For the purposes of advertising?
That's what you do, right?
Yeah. I'm just trying to answer the question as best I can. In the instances that they might have transferred supporter information, it would have come in a potentially an Excel sheet, but that would only be for a very small number of people. When they asked us to help with development of their database tool, I think the the transfer was done through some other mechanism. I'm not sure there was even a transfer. It might have just been allowing my guys access to servers, but I think Jeff would be able to speak to that.
Accessing servers doesn't tell me how the format of the information at all. That's a brutal answer. Okay, so do you do anything in the vote leave case? Did you ask if the data that was shared with you for the purposes of your work for your advertising, if it was lawfully obtained?
The data that we saw.
No. Okay, we're going to go to you. Did you ask vote leave officials if the information was lawfully obtained?
Jeff did, yeah.
Jeff did. Okay. And is that a standard thing in every instance? You'll ask if the information was lawfully obtained and if they have a right to use it?
No.
So, all right, I'm going to pass my time to Mr. Bayless.
And Mr. Massingham, you had said that vote leave, you were talking to Mr. Angus, you said that you did in fact do advertising for vote leave and that $1 million was spent. So what I'd like you to do is provide us with exact details of how much money was spent by how much money came into you from vote leave and how much you spent on advertising and how much your profit was, and how much came into you from B leave, how much you spent and how much your profit was for both of them. Do you have that information?
I should be able to put that together for you.
Okay, and I'd also like to know for your fiscal years 2015 and 2016 what your overall income was and what your overall profitability was. And link back as a percentage of this money that you made for vote leave and B leave as well.
We'll take that under advisement, yeah.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, did you ever set up a Slack, a chat room with Slack as part of your work with either vote leave or B leave?
With vote leave, yes.
With vote leave, okay. Did you set up a Facebook chat room, exchange room as well?
No.
Did you set up a Google Drive to share data?
No.
There was
I don't
no.
believe so.
Pardon me?
I don't believe so.
But you did set up a Slack chat room, is that right?
A Slack instance, yes.
Now,
For
was that used by vote leave?
Just the vote leave ad staff, or like messaging staff.
Did B leave use it as well?
No.
So I'm going to just make sure I understood this. B leave never used the chat room that you set up?
B leave set up their own instance in Slack, which we provided screenshots of that communication to you.
Was there any Slack chat room that vote leave and B leave both used?
Not that I'm aware of.
Were you involved in a chat with V leave in one and vote leave was in a separate one?
Those chats are separate, yeah.
Okay. Last set question then. Along one of your conversations with B leave in one of your chat rooms, you talked about hard stuff and soft stuff relating to types of ads. What did you mean by hard stuff?
I think just more aggressive messaging.
And that's more tailored to older voters or younger voters?
At the time, it could have been tailored to anyone. They were simply doing awareness. But
and you said soft stuff is more what?
I'm sorry, soft stuff. For their audience, seem to be better receptive.
For the B leave audience. For the B leave.
For the B leave audience, yeah.
So when you talked to the B leave audience and you said, "Look, we'll leave the hard stuff to vote leave," were you not coordinating with them?
No, I believe where that chat is being referenced was in and around a rather tragic accident or situation in the UK, and the advice at the time was simply continue on with the messaging style that they had and not be too aggressive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bayless. And Mr. Massingham, just a couple of questions for me. At any point in your testimony today were you coached by Mr. Sylvester?
No.
At any point in your testimony today were you advised by Mr. Sylvester?
No.
Okay. One last question for you, and we'll review the information that you submit to us. I'm going to give you a deadline of Monday at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time to provide what you've said that you're going to provide us as a committee. Is that sufficient time for you to get all that together? Approximately 3 days. Okay. Based on what you submit to me as chair and us as a committee, it'll make a deciding factor on whether we have you back or not, or Mr. Sylvester back or not. So I advise you to stick to that timeline as much as you can. And again, I'd like to thank you for testifying today before Ethics Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we're just going to suspend until we can clear the room to go into camera to talk committee business. Okay.